Has this ever happened to you?
Oh boy.
You are doing something that seems like a very simple task.
Sure.
You end up spending way too much time on said task. And by the end, it looks great, but you feel like you've spent too much time on it and you aren't even happy about it. You're more upset with yourself because you wasted so much time.
Um, I would say these days I am pretty good when I do a little project like that. In the early days, or the first time I do something, that almost happens 100% of the time. And whenever you do a little project at home or a little whatever you want to call it, there's only two outcomes. There's no gray area, there's no in between. It either goes together very quickly and you kick yourself for not doing it earlier or before that, or it takes three times as long as you anticipated and you end up pretty much pissed off.
Two things. I just built my son's bed, which
Yep.
is now a twin bed, and
Damn
I got
twins.
the frame from IKEA.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is that with IKEA, only certain parts are labeled, and the other parts all look the exact same but have very subtle differences. So in the instructions, you're like, I think this is the right one, and you just keep just going through all those pieces until you finally do it. You finish it, and then you say, "This frame is too big for this room. I have to return it."
I don't like IKEA stuff. I don't
I
endorse
don't love it
IKEA
either,
stuff.
but
I know sometimes you can get good deals and whatnot. I am an anti IKEA guy through and through. That sounds tremendously frustrating on your end.
it is. And then also, as someone who cuts clips, as I am the person that is in charge of the social media account,
Right, right.
I will sometimes spend way too much time on the most menial thing, the thing that just does not matter in the video, something that I think might punch it up just a little bit. And the other day, I spent 6 hours trying to Photoshop and splice Yoda and John Lithgow's face together. And by the end, I had a great result, but I was not happy with myself.
You are simultaneously like my boss and also my intern when it comes to that stuff because you're doing all the social media stuff. So I'm in between no matter what. Sometimes I can like make suggestions and help be your no guy, but in general, you're just out there in the deep water and occasionally I can throw you a little dinghy to save you, but it's all you.
That's the best description of me on this show. I'm the boss and the intern.
One, goo, three, yeah! Goo. Jaws 3. Goo. King of Queens. Goo. Meryl Streep. Entertainment.
I'm Goo.
And I am Mac.
And we are the Mac and Goo program. We decide our own fates.
Yes, we sure do. We fucking do. We have
Yeah,
free
we
will
do.
over here at the podcast.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm.
We really told whoever said we didn't have
And
free
we'll
will.
end this episode any way we want.
Today,
Yeah.
we're discussing the latest Netflix movie, I guess you would call
I
it.
say, but also you could have said greatest, and I might have shook my head yes. Because the Netflix pool is not great.
I agree with you, but this was not even close to the greatest one for me. I felt like I watched a different movie
Well,
than
then
anyone
what
else.
was the greatest?
That's a
Before we
big
even get
market
started,
tease right there.
what's the
I
greatest?
don't
The
know.
Irishman? The Irishman?
I liked Gray Man more than I like this fucking movie.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and that movie wasn't great.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've made a great movie, I guess is what I'm
What
saying.
movie are you talking about?
Today we are discussing Hitman. Hitman has hit Netflix this past weekend, so
Whoa.
it's free for you to watch if you have a Netflix subscription, which seemingly everyone on the planet does at this point. It did have a limited 2-week theatrical release, which to me was stupid. Either release it, don't do a limited release, or don't release it at all. Like, do a full release. Like, the only theater near me that was playing it was in the Seaport, and I'm not driving all the way to Seaport to see it. It was just
Was that to get awards? Question mark?
possibly.
Okay.
Possibly. And so this was originally released at one of the festivals in 2023, had a lot of buzz, a lot of critics. So there was
A lot
some
of standing ovations.
Yeah, we had some critic reviews out there already. So
Yeah.
You knew it was going to do all right when the rest of the critics saw it, which is still kind of boggling my
And
mind.
because I'm so stupid, because I'm just, if you tell me something, I'm gonna believe you. I'm pretty gullible. I was very excited about this movie. I enjoyed the trailer, but I said, this is getting written up quite well.
Yep.
Let me go ahead and strap right in.
Agree. I think there's definitely an expectations issue with this movie in general because of what we've been seeing, and also you and I like sort of falling into this Glen Powell love. Glen Powell is like sort of the next it guy. It
Let's say
seems like.
I wasn't even gonna say Glen Powell assance because we've never had the first one.
Right. Yeah, he's sort of this new eye candy, this new male star on the big screen, and just the premise of the movie, regardless of what the
Yeah.
reviews have been saying, it's a fun little premise, something we haven't really seen before. So going into this, I was expecting a romp of a comedy and some like pretty good action, and there's like a little love story in here, so you could argue a little rom-comish stuff. And
All the
I feel
things you
like
just said, it's like scraping the bottom of all those.
yeah, it fell short on
That
every
was
one of them.
underselling. It didn't scrape the bottom, but it didn't reach those peaks that we expected.
Yeah, it put like 1 foot in all of those pools just to say they did it, and it didn't
How
really
many
come to
feet does it
fruition.
have? Is it a spider? Do spiders have 4 feet or 8 feet?
So you would say they have 4 hands and 4 feet, is that what you're
That's
saying?
what I'm trying to figure out right now.
I would say they have well, it's you wouldn't say
Or
dogs have hands.
do they stand up and they have 2 feet and 6 hands?
Dogs have 4 legs, 4 feet. You wouldn't say dogs have hands.
Dogs don't stand up straight though.
I wouldn't even say spiders have feet, they just have legs.
They have no feet?
Well, I'd like to see a microscopic look at what the bottom of their
They got
legs
little
look like.
pointies, they got little pointy feet.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I'm gonna do some research off the air about that topic there.
Don't
Hit
Google too much. Don't Google too much. You don't want that to be found out later on.
Hitman is a rated R, so they had a lot of, free will to do what they wanted in this movie, and
Free will.
I don't know if they really used the R rating as well as they could have. It is an action comedy and crime. I throw rom-com-ish in there. People have been reviewing it as a rom-com. It again barely scrapes that.
I have it in my hot dog notes here. I'm not entirely sure what genre this movie is.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It tried a little bit of everything, and I would argue mostly failed at it, but was good enough to not be a bad movie, but
Also, I
not
feel
good
like
enough to be.
I'm being too hard on the movie right now because I actually kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah, I didn't really enjoy it,
Yeah.
but again, we're gonna get into that, I guess, right now over the next fucking 40 minutes here, Goo.
Or 20 minutes.
This has a runtime of 115 minutes. I actually had no issue with the length. I had an issue with the pacing in this movie. Bizarre pacing in all 3 acts.
Yeah, that and maybe like what they were focusing on with each act. I think they could have done different things to get where they had to go because it did seem like we were stuck at one point.
For sure. That's a good word. I would say 30 minutes into this movie, it felt stuck and it felt slow, and you're like, this is not the movie I was expecting at
Because
all.
maybe 90 minutes in, I did hit the little button just to see how much time was left, being like, when are we going to get this? I was assuming twist because like nothing crazy had happened yet.
That said, I did kind of enjoy the final 20 or 30 minutes until the very end. Like the very end of this movie kind of sucked.
Mm-hmm.
So that's obviously an issue as well.
Spoiler free right now.
Spoiler free. Yeah, we're gonna get there. On Roddy T's right now, Goo, and this is why like my mind is. I've had a tough day trying to
You gotta
ingest this
stop.
movie.
Stop with the Roddy T's. Stop. It's
No,
not good.
No, when both agree, and then also Metacritic is high. it's
Metacritic
telling you
was the one
something.
that does make me think. I have no idea how 82 is fucking high.
So 97% of the critics said yes, liked this. 93% of the audience, granted, not a ton of people have seen it yet, said yes, liked this. And 82 on Metacritic is astronomical for a movie in this vein.
Do you have any movies that you can compare it to that are also an 82?
No, but I'm just thinking like if you want to talk like rom-com action movies that we just saw The Fall Guy a month ago, The Fall Guy is way better than this. Do you not agree?
I like it more, but also I don't think it's like leaps and bounds.
That's a 73 on Metacritic, The Fall Guy.
I like it better.
I like to me, The Fall Guy fit perfectly as a 73. I was expecting this afterwards to be like a 62 or 65 on Metacritic, like enjoyable, but just barely, because that's how I perceive the movie when I finished watching it. To see it have an 82, to see it be dual 90s on Roddy T's, I legit, my first thought was like, I watched a different movie than what everyone else saw, because there's no way this has been that enjoyable for that many people. It didn't make sense. Now,
You are
granted,
the average man.
now, granted, Glen Powell is very good in this movie, and he's in almost all of the movie. Granted, Richard Linklater is beloved by many, and he is one of the writers and the director on this movie. So maybe that plays a part too. Maybe the early screening at the film festival last year convinced other reviewers who were on the fence to give it thumbs up instead of a thumbs down. I don't know. But again, this is written by Richard Linklater, so who obviously we know from Dazed and Confused. He did the Before trilogy. He did one of my favorites of the last 15 years, Boyhood. I love that movie. He's got a bunch of upcoming projects, none that seem pretty notable, but I'm sure we'll get a trailer at some point and say, oh, the next Linklater thing. Also, writer's credit here, Glen Powell.
Yeah.
So Glen Powell was involved writing this movie. He's actually getting into some writing here. Upcoming, he is a writer on the Captain Planet movie we're getting, which is very intriguing.
I don't know.
And then
I just pictured him getting his writer's credit for not being able to learn any of the lines, and he just made them all up. They're like, fuck it, let's just go with it.
Well, I wonder if he's the one that discovered the real life story. So that maybe that's
that
why
would
he
make
got
sense.
the credit.
Yeah.
He also has a writing credit on the upcoming Chad Powers TV series, which is I'm intrigued on that. He's playing like a retired quarterback pretending to be a college athlete, almost like that Eli Manning sketch, which is I think what they're taking that from. And this is based very loosely, I should say adapted more than anything, on the 2001 Texas Monthly article by Skip Hollandsworth of the same name. So they took the idea of this character, excuse me.
Yeah.
They took the idea of this character and basically wrote a story about this character.
Did you do any research / watch any videos on the actual guy?
I did not. Did you?
Pretty much that he was really good at getting people to admit that they wanted a hitman. So like the stuff with, creating characters, digging deep, getting into the personality, like that's stuff that he did.
Mm-hmm.
The whole love affair and everything else never happened.
Yeah, there is like a PSA at the end of this too, and that said like no one was ever killed and that sort of thing.
He also did kind of guide a woman away from giving him money, instead saying, hey, you should call services.
Fair enough. That's probably what was the genesis of the core of the story, I guess.
Yeah.
I think if I liked this movie more, I would have done loads of research on this guy and seen like who this guy was and how he lived. Also, again, directed by Richard Linklater, who, other than the ones that I mentioned he wrote, he also directed School of Rock. Synopsis of this movie.
What did it say there?
You changed it earlier and I changed it back so that I didn't slip up.
I tried to slip you up a little bit right there. I changed School of Rock to School of Cock.
Yeah.
I was debating.
Luckily, I had seen the movie before.
I was gonna change all of them to porn parodies, but then I said to myself, if I do it to all of them, he'll catch on.
Fair enough. Synopsis of Hitman. A professor moonlighting as a hitman of sorts for his city police department descends into dangerous, dubious territory when he finds himself attracted to a woman who enlists his services. This movie stars Glen Powell as Gary Johnson, a.k.a. Ron the Hitman. Adria Arjona, I hope I'm saying her name right, as Madison Figueroa Masters. She is a very attractive female.
I liked both of them, and I liked their chemistry.
Agreed with you there. Austin Amelio as Jasper. He's the ginger cop that works with Gary, but also you could tell is a very bad guy right away. Retta, who you would know from Parks and Rec, as Claudette. Sanjay Rao as Phil. He's another one of the crew members here. Graylin Bryant Banks as Sergeant Hank. Molly Bernard as Alicia, Gary's ex-wife. She gets basically one scene, but it's a nice little scene. And then Evan Holtzman as Ray, who is Madison's ex-husband. They're going through a divorce. That's really all you need to know here.
Yeah.
I have a question. Now, I know rules and regulations are different state to state when it comes to law enforcement. And I'm sure in Texas, especially, they're more free reign to do whatever you want. I don't think
this is in New Orleans.
Okay, sure. Whatever it was originally. But
before you keep on being wrong, I'm just going to stop you right there.
Texas Monthly article. That's what was in my head.
Nolans.
There you go. So, like in Massachusetts, at least in this time, you would never have just a citizen in that role that Glen Powell is in. Like that just would never happen. You would have like a highly trained guy. Also, it'd probably just be an FBI guy. You wouldn't have local police departments really doing this stuff. So I call into question how much of it actually happened. But again, New Orleans 40 years ago, completely different than Massachusetts now. Can't pretend I know Nolan's law enforcement. Uh, Goo, I thought the first 30 minutes or so of this movie was outright bad.
Oh,
I didn't
really?
know I didn't know what they were doing, what they were going for. I was just like confused, and that's where I had the first thought like, I'm not sure I'm watching the same movie as everyone else. Like the setup here fucking stinks.
Mhm.
Didn't care for it.
I didn't mind that. I did like the opening setup. I actually did lull when he was doing sprockets. That actually did make me laugh. Some of the characters that he had were pretty funny. I would have liked if maybe it took him one or two tries to get into these characters, not just immediately, hey, I'm the fucking best at this.
That is true too. Yep.
Um, but you kind of got from the beginning the overall message of like, people can change.
I used to be a piece of shit. I'm just like, for me, this seems to be the most obvious case ever of a studio paying for reviews because this went from
Ooh,
a no release to all of a
Mac.
sudden a theatrical release with all
Oh.
these numbers, high numbers on all these sites. And it is, say what you want about it. You seem to have liked the movie. I didn't really. Uh,
I
it's
liked it to a point, though. I'm
it's
not
not
saying that it's
bad.
the best thing
I'm not
ever.
saying it's bad,
Yeah.
but it is 1000% not at the level that all of these reviewers are reviewing it at. It's just not. Like that just doesn't jive. And it's like breaking my brain how this could happen.
Two
The
things.
only explanation is there's being people paid to review this movie so highly.
Two things. Number one, it's kind of bullshit that you can't Google movies with Metacritic score of 82. I just tried that.
Okay.
And then also,
They must have a master list somewhere.
is this the first time that you've accused a movie or movie company of paying for reviews?
Uh, we've probably have talked about it
Never on the
a
podcast.
few
Is that
years.
what this podcast is now? Is that
But
what we are?
they really cracked down on that type of stuff, a couple years ago and, when things were getting review bombed, more so for audience over critics. This is the first time where I am outright feeling like this has to be the case because this movie's not that good. There's no fucking chance that 97% of critics saw this movie. Because my main takeaway from this movie, Goo, before we get to, all this stuff, is it feels lazy and it feels like they just came up with these 8 characters for Glen Powell and didn't really care about the rest of the story because the rest of the story is not very good and the ending stinks. So
It's
how could
also
a film reviewer go in there, 97% of them, and it's like 200 reviews and say, yeah, I liked that.
you also just mentioned like the 8 characters and then he just only has 2. It's kind of like Split,
Yeah,
where Split
it's a
ends
little
up
like
having
that.
6, but
And
it's obviously
also,
different.
those characters only exist in about 15 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
It's like we had 15 minutes of an idea of a movie and the rest we'll just kind of figure it out. And that's what this movie feels like, which is why it feels lazy, which is why you're not invested at all in what's happening. And I think that's why the ending kind of fucking sucks.
I'm a little less on all that.
Okay.
Also, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, so
I'm just hypothesizing. Is that the word I'm
no.
looking
We
for?
are a conspiracy theory podcast now. That's fine. That's what we're gonna start doing. That's
It
how
just
we
feels
get
like that.
clicks.
That's what it feels like.
I am gonna clip that and put it
That
all over social media and get my John Lithgow Yoda and put it right in there.
Those reviews put it up there with Dune Part 2 as the movie of the year, and it's fucking not even half as good, probably. Like, it's just, it blows my mind that it's up there. It makes no fucking sense.
Agreed. I'm looking at fucking thing right now. Oh, here we go. Okay, so right now, Challengers is also at an 82.
Without having seen Challengers, I can no doubt tell you Challengers is better than this movie.
I might have liked this a little bit more.
Ooh, that's not great
I'm
for you.
saying a little bit though. And I don't know any of these other movies.
Although the best thing about this movie is probably the sexy woman in it, and that's probably the best thing about Challengers as well.
Dune Part 2, 79. Furiosa, 79.
Yeah, like what are we talking about here? This movie isn't in the same league as those. Not even
According
close.
to this,
And
it's the best of the bunch.
and not for nothing,
Above
Goo.
Mount Rushmore.
production quality wise, and if you look up the budget, it was pretty low. It does feel like a streaming movie, production
It
quality
does.
wise.
I never once felt like I was watching like a premium,
It
like
didn't feel like The
money
Fall
being
Guy.
put into it, right?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. I wish it was sexier too. It almost got there. It was sexy
It
enough.
was it was weird the way the story and the pacing and the editing, because the sexy part again was only in like a 10-minute segment. So they did like, all right, here we have all the characters. Next part, here's the sexy part. And it was very montagey like that.
Agreed. I'm looking at Metacritic, so you're up.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, do you want to get into the gauntlet?
Oh, I do want to get into the gauntlet. Let's go ahead first off here. Fun factor, I got one good lol, and then I had a couple chuckles. I would have liked maybe something a little more exciting and maybe maybe a couple more silly scenarios. Like, you know how in the movie, and this is not really spoilery, kind of is, but it's not huge. Let me dip my toe in here, Mac.
Sure.
Um, there was two scenarios where he kind of slipped into being the wrong person. Like he was Ron and he became, what's his regular name? Gil?
Gary.
Gary. So he's Ron and then he turns into Gary by accident. And then at one point he's Gary and he flips into Ron. I feel like you could have done that more, especially in that half an hour where nothing happens. Where he kind of like bleeds into himself.
Sure, yeah, you could have done more of the field work, and they'd give you like 10 seconds of field work at a time just to show you the face of a guy that was hiring a contract killer, or the face of a girl hiring the contract killer. They just like didn't give you enough of that. And that's like the whole enticing premise of this movie. And they gave you like 15 seconds of each character essentially. And it was like tremendously disappointing on that front.
Satisfactor, was this movie satisfying? This is an expectations thing, maybe, but I was expecting to be swept off my feet.
Yeah, same, totally an expectations thing. But again, for a free movie with 97%, 93%, I'm going in with pretty high expectations. So that's not on me. That's on all of you. However, all that said, there was a couple pretty good scenes in here.
Yeah.
And it was predominantly when it was just Powell and just what's her name, Arjona. When it was just those two on the screen, like acting, great scenes. A couple of really great scenes, specifically when they're like faking that interrogation in the third act there. That was pretty good. That was probably my favorite scene of the movie. But satisfying, like, I didn't get enough of the hitman. I wasn't satisfied by the ending. Like, not much to be satisfied in here by.
I also wouldn't mind if they did like a deeper dive into the courtroom scenes, because they just kind of like talk about it. They show you flashes of it. They have like the one where he kind of talks up, but like maybe some repercussions there. I don't know.
Didn't it feel like they were setting something up that was going to happen later?
They were setting up like he's going to end up in jail or something.
Yeah, it felt like they were setting something up with the courtroom stuff, and instead we just got like two courtroom scenes that didn't really do anything for the story.
You could take those scenes out and it doesn't add, or it just intrigued me and I'm like, oh, let me have a little more of this.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Borometer, sure.
I was bored for the first 30 minutes, and then in the second act, I was probably bored for half of that. Admittedly, the final 30, 35 minutes here, I liked a lot for the most part, but I was bored for a majority of this movie.
Halloween. Will this movie wane over time? Yes, it already has. When I finished watching it, I was like, okay, that was pretty cool. And now I just think it's good.
Yeah, like I don't know if I can grade it any lower. I watched it following a Celtics game. I had a couple drinks. You'd think I'd be in an easy mindset.
I was hammered drunk. My pants were down. I was ready to go.
You would think I was in a good mindset for it, and it just did not hit at all. And the Celtics had won, so you'd think this might be the perfect dessert for the end of the evening. And no, it wasn't. It was not at all.
I know last week we did, I think for Star Wars, Star Bore. That's out the window now. This has nothing to do with that.
Sure.
Mac, let me ask you, was the Hitman a hit man?
I'm neglecting to react to that question.
I'm not a businessman. I'm a business man. Aquator. It's above Aquaman for me.
I got it slightly above. It teetered there. I might have actually gone up a dog since last night. It is fucking right around the equator for me. This movie is fucking lazy.
When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And I think the chemistry of the two main characters got you squeezing.
Yeah, I guess the best candidate if you were gonna pick one person for this movie, since Powell's in the whole movie, you would pick Adria Arjona, who is the co-lead or, maybe lead actress. She's very attractive. She does a very good job. There is very good chemistry, so she's probably the best candidate here.
What's the name of the boyfriend? What's the boyfriend's name? Evan Holtzman. He plays Ray.
Yeah.
So when we first see Ray, he pulls up to a club and he looks like he just got out of fucking doo-wop practice. What the fuck was that hair? And like
A
what
budget
year is
issue.
this set
A
in?
budget issue is what that
Like
was.
he had
Yeah.
like the swoop.
They had
Like
someone
he
run
was just
into
snapping
Marshalls.
by a garbage can.
They had someone run into Marshalls with $30 and put together that whole outfit.
That wasn't a very good scene. I didn't really
No,
care
it
for that one.
wasn't. No.
Yikes bikes. Max Credit Union, who you giving credit to?
I guess Glen Powell. Like, don't get me wrong. As much as I didn't really like this movie, Glen Powell's good enough that like it holds the movie up.
Yeah.
He prevents this movie, in my mind, from being a bad movie. That's not going to be the opinion of a lot of people, apparently. But to me, he essentially saved the movie. So credit to Glen Powell.
Pants Tent City. Excite Bike Mania. What got you going?
Adrian Arjona is one hot tamale,
Oh, you
Goo.
can't
She
say stuff
is
like that anymore.
quite attractive. She reminds me of Isa Gonzalez, who we saw
Oh,
in Baby Driver. Very, very much similar to that. Two best scenes in the movie included her. I really liked, again, like you pointed to, the chemistry between her and Powell. And there was a couple sex scenes in here, Goo. So didn't see anything though.
oh, you got little side boob.
Got some side boob, but if you're tuning in to this for a little nudity, there was none.
I know, because movies are getting sexier now. And I am starting to question, like, when are they going to reintroduce the breast into the movie? That's,
And
that
again,
it was a staple in the 80s.
mm,
And then it just kind of, you still had those raunchy teen comedies that you got those in the 90s and the early 2000s. And then just out of nowhere, snap, they're gone. Dicks instead. No dicks in this movie, but
this felt like PG-13 sex, and we got an R rating. You might as well pop a tit.
was there cursing?
There was a couple swears for sure.
Okay, yeah, there was cursing. Okay.
Yeah.
For those of you tardy to the Mac and Goo party, we rate everything on a 40 hot dog rating scale. Mac, I'll let you go first.
All right. Again, this movie promised a lot of fun and action, and we got so very little of both of those things. And to remind folks at home, I'm like a sucker for a rom-com. This didn't do enough of that either. Didn't check off any of those boxes for me. The pacing and the editing wasn't for me. And when I notice those things, it's not good because I'm not this fucking film snob. So when it's apparent to me, I feel like it should be apparent to those people. The only real interesting part of the story happens in the final 30, 40 minutes. Powell and Arjona, again, are really good. The rest of the cast, I can't really compliment. The rest of the cast felt a bit spoofy. It felt like Hallmark actors almost. Like they felt like they should have been in Happy Time Murders. It felt purposefully spoofy, and I didn't care for that. It was just weird. I feel like they got caught up in all this pizzazz of Powell playing these different characters when it didn't actually mean anything for the movie's plot. Like it literally meant nothing. It was all pizzazz, no substance. And again, as much as I liked most of the final act of the movie, the definitive ending, I thought kind of sucked. Didn't care for it. Didn't like how we went like to a little fade to black, and then they give us like 2 or 3 minutes, and I was like, no, thank you, not for me. So again, blows my mind that we're sitting in the 90s. We're sitting at 82. It's absolutely bananas to me. I have this at 25 hot dogs. It does just barely enough to get above the equator. It's my number 12 movie of 2024 out of 20. So again, it's not nearly at the bottom, but it's not good. It's sitting just behind Abigail, which I had a pretty similar feeling to actually. And Ricky Stenicki in this is like sort of interchangeable. I think I both have them both at 25, just ahead of Godzilla X Kong. Like this is just in this muddied middle where I didn't care for them.
I will say this though, I enjoyed stretches of Ricky Stenicki more than this.
I was thinking about that. Like, I think the highs of Ricky Stenicki were better.
The half an hour chunk in the middle of Ricky Stenicki,
yeah,
I think is better than anything in this.
I agree. But I think Glen Powell is easily the best thing from the two movies.
John Cena in that half hour is great. The
He
full
is.
John Cena is, kind of like a little rough, but
Yeah. Yeah. So
all
again,
right,
25
Mac.
hot dogs. You could argue it up or down a hot dog. It wouldn't bother me. And I'm not saying people shouldn't like this movie. I gave it just barely a positive score. If you're going on the, you know, like 24 is a 60, borderline F. Um, I'm just surprised at the sheer amount of people that have liked it. There should be more people not liking this movie.
Have you talked to anyone about this movie besides me?
I have not.
So usually you'll get like feelers or people will text you being like, "Hey, have you seen this movie?" So no one's reached out to you about said movie?
No, it's also interesting because it only made like 1 million at the box office, so it didn't do well in its 2 weeks. So I
Mhm.
don't think people, and maybe so this might be an audience thing too, because the Fall Guy clearly didn't find its audience, and it
Yeah, but
it
The
blows
Fall
my
Guy
mind.
also wasn't free on Netflix
Sure, I
immediately.
agree
Well,
with you,
actually,
and again,
sorry, it was available pretty quickly actually, but go ahead.
this has only been on Netflix for what 3 or 4
3
days
or 4
now.
days.
But like the Fall Guy fell way short of expectations,
Yeah.
and this seems like it hasn't quite hit an audience. Whereas fucking Bad Boys 4 made 58 million on opening weekend. That
We
is
haven't seen that yet.
insane.
I'm not gonna judge the
Insane.
movie until I see the movie.
I'm not. That has no judgment of the of how good or bad the movie is, but the fact that it made 58 million in its opening weekend, and the Fall Guy made 85 million in its entire domestic run is insane.
Only one of those movies had a trailer where one of the actors said, "Put some relish on that motherfucker."
I'm mad with movie watchers right now. That's what I where I'm at.
Well, with this movie, coming away from said movie, I enjoyed it, but then as time went on, it's a little bit less and less, and I think I've actually might have dropped the dog since the start of the episode as well. The best thing in the movie is the chemistry between the two actors. The worst thing is the promise that we were given pretty much just from the trailers and even from the start of the movie. I don't know, just think it just kind of fell apart by the end. Tonally, it's kind of all over the place. It doesn't really know where to sit. It doesn't I don't really know what genre this movie belongs in because if it's a comedy, it should be funnier. If
Mm.
it's an action movie, which there's no action, so fucking throw that
It's like
away.
devoid of action somehow.
Yeah. So, is it a comedy?
I guess. I don't know.
I
It's
guess
like
yeah.
it's maybe more dramatic than anything else, even though it didn't do it well. Like that, there's like I guess it's a crime movie. I I don't know. Like it's not it has an audience issue. That's for damn sure.
I do really like the idea of adapting and changing who you are as you go on in life because people shouldn't just always be the same person. You kind of need to figure out what's going on for you. And I do like that idea.
Mm.
But
That's fair.
oh, 29 hot dogs.
Yeah, like a movie with this promise and this idea, shouldn't there have been like two really memorable scenes or two great scenes that like delivered on this fake hitman idea? And instead, we got none. It's like
I
pretty
can't
forgettable when it comes
yeah,
to
I
that.
can't even think of one.
Yeah, it's fucking weird. It's weird that that seemed like what the movie was built around, and they didn't even build that base well. It's just I'm flummoxed, absolutely flummoxed by this goo. It's one of the weirdest viewing experiences I've had in a while because instead of now this isn't a brag, but a lot of times we go into movies not knowing how critics and audiences will feel about the movie. So how we feel about the movie is completely, us. We were
Yeah.
not influenced by things. This there was a clear influence on me going in, and it really affected the way I viewed the movie.
Shall we spoil?
Yeah, let's get to the spoilers. Spoilers,
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 spoilers
spoilers.
from Jay on Rotten Tomatoes. This is a 5-star review. Loved it. And Glen Powell is great in it. The one thing I did not like was that at the end, he replaced his cats with dogs. Frowny face.
Yeah, so let's discuss the ending. I think the only thing really worth discussing in the movie at
That's
this
all we have
point.
left to talk about right now.
So, uh, with maybe 10 minutes left in the movie, the ginger cop discovers or
Jasper.
confirms his hunch that Glenn Powell's character, Gary, and what was her name? Madison, had concocted this story that in that fake interrogation scene, he
Yeah.
catches them. And in the prior 10 minutes, we learned that Madison did shoot and kill her soon-to-be ex-husband, which they also didn't spend enough time on, but I did like that scene when he finally breaks character, tells her everything, and they're both panicking. That was a good scene. The next good scene was the fake interrogation. But
The
then
one
they
thing
get to
about the fake interrogation, though, is that it was so over the top and I don't think was believable at all. Yet everyone on the other end's like, well, I guess that's the end of that
yeah,
chapter.
that's true.
I guess she
Yeah.
didn't kill her husband because we have this conversation here with no video, mind you.
That's what it felt streaming quality too. But I
Yeah.
did like the scene. So, um, but then we get this final 10 minutes where you're in. You know what it was going for. Goo was have you finished Better Call Saul?
No.
What it was going for was the scene with Lalo Salamanca, Saul, and Kim in their apartment in the final season, and like the intimidation and like this heavy overhanging stuff. And boy, did it not reach that at all. And for someone who seems to be so keen at sniffing things out, she very easily drugs this fella. It goes down within what, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then the plot they come up with is to tie a CVS bag around his head so he suffocates while he's sort of knocked out.
And they
And
do it on top of him.
yeah, they essentially get off on that. And then it just cuts to black. They don't show what they did with his body, how they set up. He does describe what they might do. They never talk about the ex-husband's murder because she was cleared from there. But it seems pretty bizarre that if he is mildly implicated in this whole thing and then his coworker dies, you might be looking at that. So maybe Jasper didn't say anything to anyone else. I don't know. The ending just stunk. And then it cuts to black. And you're like, oh, I wonder what we're going to get into next, because clearly it was going to jump to something. And then it just jumps to their kids in school. It's like 5 years later, they have 2 kids and everything's happy. Have they been killing? Right. Have they been lit? Like, there's nothing. I would prefer them jump and now they're just like serial killers or something. I don't know. Anything is better than what we got.
Right. And he doesn't go full Sandy. He doesn't like do a full 180. He's kind of still himself. He's kind of still Ron, but he doesn't, just pop on a leather jacket and say, "What do you tell me about it, stud?"
And it's also like her murder is much different than his murder.
Her murder. Murder.
But I would have a hard time if I was her, like really thinking about him killing his coworker, because she killed her ex-husband in somewhat of self-defense.
Once you kill someone, you can't be too picky about who you're going to stick with, especially when that person knows that you murdered the person.
I totally agree. I just don't know if I'm having 2 kids with that fella afterwards.
I wouldn't have minded, actually, if in the final scene you find out that she murdered him.
I thought it was going to go that way. And they were sort of playing her as this femme fatale character. And then she just turns into being a housewife.
And then it turns out that she is actually with the police chief by the end.
If they had leaned into more of her being the femme fatale, more Gone Girl type stuff, that was a much more enticing thing. And it felt like they were going to go down that path. And instead, they just embraced each other and got horny over both of them having a murder under their belt.
Yeah, I mean, I really do feel like there was more than enough time to have a couple scenes where like they're out doing something, because at a certain point of the movie, they said, okay, we don't have to just be at the house. And they would be in a scenario where one of them would slip up on their personality and become who they actually are. And then there's hijinks or something.
To me, at that point, even when they've sort of confirmed their love for each other, a much more interesting ending would be sort of Gone Girl-ish, where they're like, all right, we're stuck together, but I don't trust this person. I'm terrified this person is going to kill me. And instead we get the opposite. We get them living happily ever after. It was dumb.
Yeah, so what should have happened is after they killed Jasper, they should have hopped on a bus and then Sound of Silence should have played.
Better ending.
That's
ending.
From The Fucking Graduate. So
I know.
I was going to say.
Better ending still. Of course, I know the ending to The Fucking Graduate.
Have you seen The Graduate?
Actually, The Graduate, I'll credit The Graduate for being one of the first movies to like really get me into cinema and film because we watched that. At least, did you watch that senior year of high school too?
I watched it in humanities class. Is
Yeah,
that what it's
they
called? Yeah.
showed it to us in humanities. It was one of like the 4 or 5 movies they showed that were like significant
Yeah.
in cinema history. So credit to The Graduate.
Storytelling, if you will.
Mm. And bittersweet endings.
Do you have anything else with this movie?
Not enough movies finish bittersweet, by the way, which is what The Graduate is fucking known for, of
You
course.
know what? That's a good little topic there. Bittersweet endings.
Yeah, that is the absolute
Like in
the
Cruel
apex of them.
Attentions when they play the song Bittersweet Symphony. So you know it is.
Well, that was that was not a bittersweet ending. It is a little bit for the viewer, but
Yeah.
I think she gets her comeuppance in that.
What other movies? You know, let's save that. Let's put a pin in that. We're
Yeah.
gonna jump on that
As
eventually.
long as the Verve allows us to play a bittersweet symphony the whole
I
time we
don't
talk
think
about
the
it.
Verve owns that song. I think Rolling Stones do. Because they sampled the Rolling Stones without asking, or they
Oh,
stole the chord progression.
okay. Well, they interpolated it.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Let's get into Maxac. And Maxac could be anything. It could be a boat. And before we get into what Maxac is this week, guys, you can email us, X us, Instagram us, and send in things. Send in Maxac ideas. I'm going to
Mhm.
start compiling them, and we'll start doing them. We'll start ratting them off. This week, I did think it was important because we're kind of at the halfway point of the year
Yep.
to get a quick update on our movie draft, our auction movie draft, our award-winning every year auction movie draft with the hashtag Dork Boys, and you have some points.
Yeah. Bringing up the rear right now is Mr. Ryan Davey. He of the only 16 movies drafted. He has 180 points off of 5 releases. So he's only had 5 movies come out. He does have 9 movies left. Of those 16, he lost 2 of them to 2025. So he's going to have 14 movies coming out this year. He's going to have a very hard time winning this thing. Currently in third place, just behind the second place, is Keith with 250 points. He's had 10 movies come out, exactly half of his movies. He does have 10 movies left, though. 10 confirmed 2024 releases, which is going to go a long way, I think. You're in second currently with 260 points, 10 points ahead of Keith, and 260 off only 5 movies. So you're doing well per movie on a per movie basis. However, you only have 9 movies left, but you could have 11. You have 2 TBAs, so that we don't know if they're going to be 24 or 25
Well,
yet.
Coyote versus Acme too. That might.
And you did lose 3 movies, technically 4, because you drafted Coyote Acme. It was dead in the water. So you also pretty much started at 16. So not great for you. But again, you have 260. You're doing well per movie. So maybe it's your year. Currently in first place is myself with 370 points. A third of that I can thank
Dune 2.
to Dune 2. Off of 8 movies total. I do have 12 movies left, though. So I'm in a good spot here to sort of keep my lead. I've built an early lead. I may be able to keep it. I do have a couple bigger releases, but I do have a ton of like $1, $2, $3 movies left. You, of course, have Deadpool and Wolverine, which could be
Oh,
125. So you still have points left, of course. But if it comes down, I'm up 110. And if I have 12 movies left and you have 11, I would say the betting odds are clearly in my favor.
I had Hitman, right?
You did have Hitman, which again, since it's scoring well, it's going to do pretty well. But
I'm the
no
one
money.
who paid the critics.
And Keith's not out of it either. He's got 10 movies left, so it's I'd say David's the only one definitively.
So what
out
you're
of it.
saying is that the only one of us out of the 4 that has no chance of winning this,
Yeah.
would be Ryan Davey.
Yes, I think we knew that when the minute the draft ended, but I think that is now confirmed after 3 or so months into the draft season. With 9 movies left, I don't think Davey can make up the gap
Do
here.
you think he believes that?
No. Yeah, you got to keep confidence for your players. You know,
Just
you got
like
to keep sending them out there.
Fred Durst said, you
And
gotta
listen,
have faith.
someone's gonna come in last. It'll be Ryan Davey 3 years in a row if it is this year, but someone's gonna come in last.
Also in your sack, I just want to quickly get into, I have recently gotten back into the Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend podcast because he had Paul Scheer on, and Paul Scheer is a podcasting veteran, and he just went on there with story after story after story, and he's such an enjoyable figure. I don't want to give too much away. I want you to listen to the podcast, but he talks about how for his wedding, his best man was a Jack Nicholson impersonator,
Jesus Christ.
which is
Sheer
just hilarious.
Sheer was Letterman's lead guy forever, right?
What?
Or was on late night?
So Paul Scheer was, I think you're thinking of Paul Schaefer.
That's who I'm thinking of.
Paul Scheer was
I'm thinking
Andre
of
from
Paul
no,
Schaefer.
Paul Scheer is Andre from The League.
I had well, in my head, I was like, of course he has great stories. He was on late night for fucking 40 years.
No, this is just no. And Paul
Okay.
Scheer's stories has nothing to do
Paul
with his
Scheer does not equal Paul Schaefer. Different guy.
nothing to do with his celebrity. It's just growing up, he has the most ridiculous stories.
That's interesting. All right.
And then also,
Maybe I can
because he
manifest that
talked.
podcast.
What's up?
Maybe I can manifest that Paul Schaefer on
A
Conan
Paul
O'Brien.
Schaefer podcast.
Yeah.
And then because of the Paul Scheer podcast, he mentions Jack McBrayer on there.
Mhm.
Of course, Jack McBrayer, known from 30 Rock, he played Kenneth. And then Conan talked about how him and Jack McBrayer, because Jack McBrayer is from the South, so he's very, very Southern, that whenever Conan sees him, he has this issue where he immediately goes into shtick of, well, look at the
'Cause
Southerner.
So now that you say that, I don't know if I've ever seen McBrayer not in a character form.
Yeah.
So I don't know what his natural speaking voice is, but if it is
It's
what
that.
it is on
It's exactly
30
the
Rock,
same.
oh
So
my God.
his
That would be
episode of
hard to
Conan-
not get gimmicky.
his episode of Conan from 2022 is an hour of that, where Conan he can't stop doing it, and Jack
It is a
McBrayer,
ridiculous accent.
and they mention this, is that McBrayer is like, he's a student of improv, yet every time that Conan says something, he's like, no, you stop that. And they're like, just to say yes, and I don't want you to. It's fucking great. I'm doing a bad job explaining it. Just go and
Okay.
check out the Scheer
Yeah.
and McBrayer episode.
But again, Paul Scheer, not Letterman's lead band guy. That's Paul Schaefer.
No, I'm talking about Paul Scheer, the host from, or one of the hosts from How Did This Get Made, the podcast with Jason Mantzoukas.
When I read this note before the podcast started, I
Yeah.
had in my head, wow, Paul Schaefer, I bet he would be a good podcast guest.
Aha! That was his old thing. Also, still, the best thing that Paul Scheer ever did is that he did reenactments of classic Arsenio Hall bits. He called them Archerio Paul. And they did word for word exactly what the bit was. And they are fantastic. They're still on YouTube.
That is exactly your style.
It's exactly my style. And then Arsenio Hall had him on as Archerio Paul. It was a time to be alive, really.
Sure it was.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Mac, where can the people find us?
You can find us on Twitter and on Instagram at Mac and Goo Podcast. That's Mac Shift 7 Goo. That includes Facebook, every other platform. We are Mac ampersand Goo. That includes Facebook, Stitcher, TuneIn, Castbox.
Oh, time
Google
out.
Play,
Stitcher's gone.
Radio.
You can
Yeah.
take that out of the script.
No, it's going to stay in there because it's just what I've been saying for fucking 6 or 7 years now. We're on Spotify, but more importantly, we're on Apple Podcasts. Get on there, rate, review, subscribe, 5 stars. If you do, we'll get you a free Mac and Goo t-shirt from the folks over at Watertown Sportswear. Watertown Sportswear, expert screen printing and embroidery.
John, I'll send your shirt out soon, bud.
Boom. There you go.
Yeah.
How's it in the flesh?
I apologize. tpublic.com merch.
We're going to get our intern
Buy
on that.
Hats. I'm the intern.
Yeah.
Hats, guys. Are you going to Fan Expo Boston?
Yeah, I was wondering what day you were going to go. I probably can't go. I could go Friday, but it'd be a tough poll. I would prefer Saturday.
Okay, so I am going on Saturday, but I am working. Goo's a
Okay,
big
I don't
time
give a fuck
reporter
about
at
that.
this bitch.
Yeah.
So
Do we know if Tomei is going to be there Saturday?
I believe she is.
Okay, that's all I want to go for.
Because then I also might go back Sunday for pleasure.
I can't
Pleasure.
go Sunday. I could probably swing like late Friday, but I think Saturday is my best bet.
Okay, yeah. So if you see us, look for Goo. He'll have a microphone.
All right, there you go.
Tell
He'll be
me
the
about
only
your
one in there.
costume. I got a bit planned out, so let's see if this happens.
It's gonna go poorly.
It might, but I'm going to do it very, very quickly, though. So blink and I'm gone. All right, so check us out at the end of the week for a news dump. Tuesdays are goose days. I abuse kangaroos.
Bye.
Tim Burton.
Please flip the cassette over to side B to continue the adventure.